how did this whole thing get started?
Sure. I'm the owner and curator of an exhibit called the Nostalgia Awakens, and it's a kind of a long story, but my normal 9 to 5 job is I'm the director of a county history museum, and I'm also a longtime toy lover, toy collector, action figure collector, and in a story we can get into if you like, I collected a lot of the toys of my childhood, recollected them back at an early time like right before that curve in which a lot of people from my generation, our generation, just rekindled their love of Star Wars, and we're buying up a lot of the vintage toys at a very good price because again, there wasn't a lot of interest during those dark times. I, like many kids, wished there were toys to play with of Star Wars, and there weren't, and so we did other things. We played with sticks in the backyard, played pretending with their lightsabers. We drew pictures, and we read the books that were available. We tried to eat up as much as we could. I never had the early bird certificate. I didn't know it existed as a kid. I didn't know to ask for it until later when I was a collector. I learned about it. So I, like many kids, had my first action figure in the spring of '78. We went to a friend's house, my mom's friend's house, and she had a son a year younger than I am, and he shows me a Darth Vader figure. And again, this is almost a year after I saw the movie, and I just flipped and said, "This is, Mom, there are Star Wars toys now." Because I had asked her to look for them and asked at Christmas time, and there weren't any.
Yeah.
And so she took me to our local, it was either a Kmart or a Shopko. Those were our two places where we bought such things. And I remember staring at an end cap of Kenner figures and looking at them and just being told I could pick out one of them and just trying to decide which one. But I ended up choosing Chewbacca, and that was in spring of '78. And shortly thereafter, my birthday's in April, I got a few more. And then at Christmas, of course, of '78, got a few more. My grandparents were very generous with allowing my younger brother and I to kind of make a list from the Christmas catalogs from JCPenney and Sears. And we were able to get some toys then. And for me, all throughout those three movies, it was always Star Wars. You know, that was the top of the list. Action figures just really spoke to me as a toy, as a kid. Like so many that, kids that loved Star Wars at one point, we started ignoring it. And despite Kenner's, last grasp for our money, or our parents' money, with Power of the Force in '85, it just didn't do any good. I remember walking into a drugstore. We were going in there for something unrelated to toys, and it was probably 1986. And walking past a dump bin of Power of the Force figures.
Yeah.
And I remember stopping and picking up and noticing a Han Carbonite that had been multiple layers of stickers, of price stickers on, from like $2.99 to $2.49 to $1.99. It was down like to 59 cents. I remember looking at it in my mind thinking, this is kind of a cool idea, but who wants this anymore? It seems so old and played out. Of course, we both know what happened to that Han and Carbonite later. And so many of the other ones, I always wondered, like, man, if I just would have bought those and kept them. Anyhow. But what happened, though, is right before that, it was in 1991. It was the fall of '91, winter of '92, right around there. I was home from college for a weekend, and I went to a record convention in Milwaukee where people buy and sell music and other related merchandise. And at this convention, there was a booth that was set up, or a booth that was manned by a company that sold a publication that for buying, selling, and trading music. But they also sold one for buying, selling, and trading toys. On its pages, toys, some antique, old stuff. And then I saw a Millennium Falcon for sale for like $80, a loose Millennium Falcon. And something caught my attention about that, thinking my toys have value. I'm sitting there looking through this magazine and looking at all these toys that I used to have. And then I'm seeing stuff that I never knew they made. Like they made a Y-Wing. They made an Imperial shuttle. And it was like this idea opened up in my mind. The first thing was that I need to find my toys. I need to go back to my parents' place and see what still exists. And two, I need to get the rest. I need them all. And so I started this campaign to try to collect the stuff again. And again, at this time, nobody I knew was doing this or caring about it. I was doing it kind of on the sly because I'm sure my friends would have teased me about it. But my kids get a kick out of this. I said, okay, I sat down at an electric typewriter and I typed out, wanted Star Wars toys. I will pay you cash. And I'm typing that out and I'm hanging these things at laundromats and grocery stores because that's how you did it back then. I'm trying to hang them where moms would be, because moms are the gatekeepers to all this stuff because the kids off at college or moved out. And I remember the first place I went to is this woman's house, and she had one of those oval kind of wood dining room tables, and it was full. She had full of Star Wars figures in different shapes, and she kind of tried to match up some of the weapons, but there were some Fisher Price adventure people on the table, some G.I. Joe, maybe even some Micronauts, and I'm thinking, I don't want any of that stuff. I just want that guy. There's an Imperial gunner from the Power of the Force line. I want that guy, and I want that and that. And I was like, and she's like, no. You're not, I'm not selling this like piece by piece. You're taking the whole thing. What are you going to give me for the whole thing? And I'm like, all right. So I gave her, I paid a little bit more than what I had wanted. But in hindsight, it was such a smart move because I just swept all this stuff into a box, pulled out the stuff I was really excited about, and the rest I kind of kept aside for years. And I ended up using that stuff as trading fodder in the years to come once the prices start to go up. One thing was really helpful for me is that I went to the University of Wisconsin, in Madison. And down the road from where I lived was this place called Toy Therapy. And it was owned by a guy just a few years older than me named Kevin. And not only was this place like a toy museum, because he had, he bought and sold action figure toys of all kinds. And it was just cool to hang out there and just be with a kindred spirit in a way. But the other thing was that he would set me up. He's like, what do you need now? I'm like, well, I'm looking for a TIE interceptor. And he's like, okay, it's going to be about this amount. And so I would go in that box of extra stuff and all the other things and kind of trade them. And it really worked out well because, again, I was just ahead of the curve. And that's the way a college student, with no money very little money was able to kind of start collecting this stuff. Because I'll tell you, as soon as 93 came around, the prices began to creep up there. In 2015, The Force Awakens is coming down. Everybody's excited about Force Awakens. We didn't know what we're going to get. And all we knew is this is going to be the sequel to Return of the Jedi and that our old heroes are going to be back. And so this was beginning of 2015, and a colleague of mine said, hey, Jarrod, didn't you used to collect Star Wars toys? And I said, yeah, I did, but they're all packed away at my mom's place still. Thankfully, they never made me get rid of them or take them out of their house because my place was too small. And she said, why don't you do an exhibit of the Star Wars toys, the vintage stuff, in kind of, really ride off the excitement, the pop culture excitement, do that at your museum. And at first I kind of balked at it. I'm like, man, 40 years old is that old enough to be in a museum and be respected? And I thought about it a little bit more. I'm like, this stuff, it's an important story. And so I did. And so I went through my collection and I decided that if I'm going to create an exhibit in a museum and have it be respected, it has to be complete. Two, they have to be in great shape, in passable shape at least. They have to be original, no reproductions, and they have to be a finite collection. It can't just be Star Wars stuff, because there are people that could do that much better than I could, and it's not contained. So my story is about the effect that the Star Wars toy line had on childhood and on the toy industry and on the movie industry. That's the story being told with my collection. And so what it's a collection of every Star Wars action figure toy made by Kenner for the original 3 movies. As long as it was based on something from the movie, it is there. Now, for guys like you that understand what Kenner created, I have to qualify that because you won't find mini rigs there. Why? Because mini rigs weren't in the movies. And as a kid, I didn't want anything to do with them. They were okay. They were fun to play with. But if I had a choice between a land speeder and a mini rig, I'd choose a land speeder. And so I don't have mini rigs in there. They were not based on it. And then, and there's nothing in package. It's all out of package, but it's all complete. So like the Rebel transport, that big cigar shaped thing, it comes with. I still have all the little masks and backpacks and things that it came with because it would have had that. I wanted to make sure that when you, the visitor, come and look at this exhibit, it is as how you remember it. Not like how I saw my toys in that box that day. I came back and was like, oh my gosh, this stuff is so yellow and it's missing, and the stickers are curling off and it's missing this and that. Like these things are not pristine. They're not like a 90 and up or anything like that. But they're in good enough shape that when people come, they say, wow, this is in great shape, because that's important to me that you connect to it, because that is your childhood too. It's a great joy to share it with the audiences. I love sharing it with fans. I love hearing people's stories about what Star Wars toys meant to them and what memories, that farm boy Luke figure, what memories they have of that, or the Wampa, or whatever it might be. It's just fun to connect on that level.
These figures, they've really kind of like withstood the test of time, amazingly enough, and so have a lot of other toys, I suppose. But what is it about these figures that think, guys like me and you, that just hold a special place in our hearts?
Mm-hmm. I think the Kenner line of Star Wars toys holds a special place in our hearts because this was it's a couple of things. One is that the movie has a place in our heart. The movie had such a strong impact on us as kids that it made us want to recreate the scenes of the movies. It wanted us to create new stories, and those figures gave us, you and I, little kids, the power to do that. I could sit and hold Luke Skywalker, who is this Jedi, and I could hold Darth Vader, who is a Sith Lord, and I could have them duel, I could have them fight, I could have them do anything, and it was mine. It was my world. And so that's a powerful thing, for a kid, and it has that effect. And also, Star Wars also was the first toy line to really have an extensive line of figures and of vehicles and of play sets. There were others, but based on something at the movie theater, that was really the first big one. Planet of the Apes and the Mego Corporation, they were doing that because the movies were in syndication. That's true. But Star Wars was really the first movie to have this extensive line and this broad appeal. See that Luke Skywalker farm boy, I always go back to him because, or R2, like when we see him, we think of the holidays that we got these as gifts. Yeah. We think of the Christmas catalogs that we, the JCPenney and Sears and Montgomery Road catalogs that we saw them in and pointed at and circled that we wanted. We think of the birthdays that we got them from. We think about the trips to the dime store where we were allowed to pick out one of them. That all those positive things come rushing back when we see that Tatooine Luke's face.
So maybe this is my next question, and maybe that answers it. But what is your favorite figure?
Well, what is my favorite figure? Well, Chewbacca holds a special place in my heart, and he's and I said this exhibit does not have toys in the package. There is one. I have one Chewbacca on a 12-back card still, and sometimes if space allows, I'll display him in the section where I feature all the figures. But just because he was the first one, he was my gateway, and at the time it was a difficult choice. But I'd say probably Luke would be my favorite, Luke or Han, because they were the heroes and they were the figure that I could channel myself through. So probably one of the two hero figures would be my favorite.
And is there anything that you don't have that you really want?
Anything I don't have that I really want. So another key piece that I think is really cool that I saw in that magazine back when I was discovering all the stuff that was made that I never knew they made is the Palatoy Death Star. That thing, when I first learned of it, it just blew me away because this is such a cool playset. I would have loved to have had that as a kid. Now, my favorite toy, Star Wars toy, is probably the Death Star playset that we had here in the States. But I still love that, and I knew I wanted to have that as part of this exhibit, even though it's technically Palatoy and not Kenner. It was such a unique piece made to go along with that. It's kind of a a bonus, I think, in there just because it's just so cool. But anything that I really that I'd like to, I mean, it's a pretty complete set again. Like there's nothing that I would say is missing. And of course there may be someone who's really knowledgeable of these things who might say, well, what about this, Jarrod? And then I hope I'd have a good response for it not being there because I'm claiming that it's complete. Recently, within the past year, of something I never knew existed before that I'm looking out for. And what it is, it's a special display background of the Death Star that came packed in the Darth Vader TIE Fighter, in 1979. It was packaged, and it has a sticker on the box saying "free included inside Death Star background." They don't call it a playset; they call it a background. And it would be cool to have that because while it's not a playset, it's a background, and it's made the same way that a lot of Kenner's playsets were made. I mean, if you think about like the Adventure Cantina, which was a Sears exclusive that came with 4 figures, it's nothing but a folded piece of cardstock, but it came with 4 figures, and it's considered a playset. So because of that reason, I'd love to be able to buy that Death Star backdrop. But I don't want anybody else going out looking for these, but I've been waiting, and I have my feelers out there. They just don't come up. There's another one that was packed in, the Slave One, that's made from it's the same thing, but it's trimmed up a little bit. And that one I don't want because it's got a little bit cut off so it would fit inside the box. That one is ultra rare, like super rare. But I'd love to, and they make repros of both of these, but I won't buy those for the exhibit because everything has to be original. And I had dabbled with the idea of getting a vinyl cape Jawa, just as a kind of like, hey, did you know that, this kind of like have him as part of the display, even though it's a variant that's not that big of a deal to me. He's not a new figure. But the problem with those, as you probably know, being a collector, is that reproductions, and I'm not slamming reproductions because there's a place for reproductions, but reproductions have made it very difficult to tell what is original and what's a repro. And I'm not going to buy a vinyl cape Jawa unless I know for sure. And the only way to do that is to buy a graded example. And that immediately puts it at 4 figures. We're looking at $2,000 to $3,000. And it's like, I told my family I would never spend family money on this. It's all through trading and selling. And I don't have a lot of stuff left over these days to trade and sell. I have some old G.I. Joe stuff left that I could probably sell. The only thing I save anymore is my Superpowers collection of figures. I sold the vehicles off, but I see that you two are a fan of Superpowers, and I have every one of them except Shazam, and I'm holding out because, doggone it, he can't come. The Shazam with the original cape doesn't go below $350, it seems, and he's been hovering at $350 on eBay for a good year and a half now.
How'd you get your Cyborg? Those are super expensive.
As a kid,
really?
As a kid, yep. Cyborg was super expensive. Thankfully, my brother Kevin and I, we loved Superpowers. I mean, this was the first big DC figure line since Mego, and we were kind of too young for that, for Mego. But so they were beautifully done, as you know, and we wanted them all, and we wrote it out to the very end, and we got every one except for Shazam. Shazam was the only one we could never find.
Wow. Thank you so much to Jarrod Roll, the creator of the Nostalgia Awakens exhibit, for joining me. It's been featured widely throughout the Midwest, and hopefully that continues and maybe even expands. You can find more at StarWarsExhibit.org. Thank you again to Jarrod, and as always, please like and subscribe to the video, and we'll be back with more Toys You Remember.